So, I mean, the topic today is salvaged deals or saved deals, and I think one of the key takeaways to this is this was right at the beginning of the deal that we saved it. It wasn't a story of title issues or things after we've gotten it under contract. We can lose deals right before they even start.
All right, guys, here we go now. It is time to unlock more doors to deals. We're real estate investors here. We're real estate agents here, and we all have one thing in common. We believe that we can. We can live the life of our purpose. We can create financial freedom. We can build a better life for those that we love, and we can live the life of our dreams. I don't care if you're trying to do your first deal or your 500th this year. You can get to the next level, and we're here to help. Welcome to Doors to Deals. I'm your host and founder, Jim Manning. Today's episode can be found on doorstodeals.com/bonus003 and was hosted by one of my very best friends in the entire world and my business partner for the past decade of my life, Ryan Wessels. So we've had a lot of ups and downs over the years as business partners, and I can't say enough about his loyalty and his friendship over the years. As far as his skill set goes, this guy is a deal genie. He's a master at analyzing deals, keeping deals together, negotiations, having difficult conversations when they're needed, and the list goes on and on. The guy has forgotten more about analyzing properties, squeezing every penny out of flips on the sales side than what most people will ever end up knowing, as he's literally done this thousands of times now over the past decade. So anyway, it's my pleasure to share with you this training that Ryan ran for our Three Doors Network members on saving deals. This is just one example of over 3 years worth of trainings and content that we have in our online training vault that all our Three Doors members get access to. I wanted to share this with you all today just to kind of touch and feel and see what you have access to if you become a Three Doors member. So here we go now. Let's get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. So today we are tasked with talking about salvaging deals, saving deals. It's one of the most underrated topics in my opinion, and it's differentiates the people I think that are excellent at this job and the people who aren't. So let's get into this. And before we get into the training, we have our normal schedule the rest of the week. We have tomorrow the Ask Me Anything call at 12:30, and then we have the 8 a.m. Free for All Friday. We took off Monday in observance of 4th of July, and so we're back at it today. So hopefully everyone enjoyed their 4th. Jim is away on vacation, enjoying himself and his family. So you get me today. We're going to be joined by Dave Stelmach a little bit later and Michael Oliver as well. We will promptly end around 11 o'clock. We're going to jump on this topic and dive into it as much as possible. You'll probably have about 5 to 10 minutes to ask some questions if there are any at the end. And if you'd like throughout, you can always chat. We've got this chat function right here. So please chat any questions as they come up. We're going to be talking about stories. We're going to be talking about deals that we've done. And the best way to learn is to ask questions. So be interactive. We'd love to get it. Let's jump into it. So I wanted to start out this by just an overview. So change the way we look at things and the things we look at change. It's one of those fun phrases, but it's absolutely true. We change the way we look at things, and the things we look at change. Why do I want to start with that? I want to start with that because when we face an obstacle, whether it's on the retail side or the investment side, you have two options. You can persevere, you can continue to move forward, or you can say, that roadblock, I can't get past it. Based on the way that I was raised in this business, I did short sales. I don't often take that second path. I try to think of another way. I try to think of a way through that wall, around that wall, over, under. I don't know. Some way, somehow, I want to try to get past that obstacle and get the deal done. So that's what we're talking about today. Change the way we look at things. So with that, how many different ways do you look at properties or a lead? So on the retail side, how many different ways do you look at it? On the investment side, how many different ways do you look at it? So let's talk about on the investment side for just a minute. Specifically, if I can get my screen to move. Here we go. We look at wholesale, hotel, rehab, rental. Let's not forget that retail part, right? So there's 5 ways people probably look at leads, and most investors only look at the first 4. But hopefully they have a good agent that they refer their deals to if they're unable to buy them, right? So there's 5. That's pretty easy. But what happens on those deals that don't work out as a wholesale, hotel, rehab, rental, or as retail? Are there other ways to do deals? Absolutely. What about creative financing? Subject to owner financing deals, vacation rentals. What I'm talking about, those are all niche-based exit strategies. So as you're looking at deals, do niche-based exit strategies allow you to open up to more opportunities to do more deals? So I'll give you a quick example on the retail side. We're going to go over this a little bit later, but as an agent, if you have a seller that owes roughly what they need to sell it for, and they have no money, they have no way to get money, is that a deal that normally would go to the wayside? The answer is probably yes. And I'd argue that there's other ways that you can still monetize that particular deal. One way is subject to financing. That's just one of other different other options. So again, change the way we look at things. The things we look at change. Don't accept no. Went over this a little bit. We're going to go over title issues. A lot of issues come up because of title. A lot of roadblocks. Again, I'll go back and reference the short sales background that I had. It gave me a great introduction and crash course in title issues. Every short sale encounters title issues. So it was never we can't do this deal because of this issue. It was, how do we resolve this issue? And let me tell you, some issues are really tough to resolve. The one that comes to mind most is, yes, Jen, I will in a bit. We're actually going to go over a deal. Sorry. The one that I remember most about title issues is actually a tax lien, an IRS tax liens. Those are extremely difficult to get off properties. You can do it, but extremely difficult. Seller issues. Sellers always are dealing with issues. Hey, maybe they don't want to buy. Just talked to an agent yesterday on our team that they had to reduce the price because we're currently in an environment where a lot of properties are going up for higher prices, and appraisals are not meeting those prices that they're going under. So in this particular instance, I think the price was $325, and the seller ended up having to come down to $310 because the appraisal did not come in at $325. So that's a seller issue. Does the seller want to accept $15,000 less than what they just thought they were? And then close rate. I bring this up because I don't know how many investors actually know what their close rate is. And most investors know, well, hey, I'm going to go on X amount of appointments, and I'm going to get that many deals under contract. Okay, great. But out of the deals that you get under contract, how often do you close? Everyone has some deals that fall out. That's inevitable. Maybe it's because the seller flakes. It's because of title issues that sometimes they are unresolvable because the property isn't worth anymore what we could then buy it for. There are a variety of reasons. Knowing your close rate is important, in my opinion, because then you can tell your seller, hey, we close 90% of the time that we get a house under contract. And I can say, because I've tracked this for years, we're somewhere around 85%. And then if you drop off the deals that were issues because of us, because of sellers that we don't control, so deals that we more or less backed out of, it's less than 10%. It's less than 7.5. So I mean, we will close unless the seller can't perform 90 to 93% of the time. Important for you to know. Let's get on to Dave. Dave, are you available to talk? All right. So I asked Dave and Ali if they could join me today. And Dave, I don't know if you got to hear all of that. Anything you wanted to add about the original overview that I just gave?
No, I think it sounds pretty good. Yeah, the title issues, sticking through and working through that, and having different exits to helps out. Definitely, the one that I was going to talk about is the exit was a huge factor in being able to kind of hang in there. So yeah.
So you gave me two stories, and I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Well, let's start with Litzinger first, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So Litzinger, tell a little bit of background about the deal, the story, so that everyone can get some context about it.
Yeah, Litzinger, like really great, good property, good location. The guy had lived there for a while, then moved to the country. He was very proud of the property, and was a good salesman at selling it too. So I met him twice, I think, and then the second time we got a verbal agreement in place. He wanted 245. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. The numbers aren't terribly important, but I think he wanted 245, and we were at 240. And we may have started a little bit lower and came up to 240, and then verbally handshake agreed that we had a deal at 240, and I was going to send him the contract via DocuSign to sign that night. And that's how we left that meeting. And you met him, I think, Ryan. Yeah, you met him. Neither of us were too worried that he wasn't a man of his word or anything. We both felt like we had the deal. And so he didn't sign the contract that night. And the next morning, he still hadn't signed the contract. And the next afternoon, he still hadn't signed the contract. I've called him multiple times at this point. And each time, whenever I was able to reach him, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll get that signed." So then the next day, so this is 2 days now after the verbal handshake agreement, he calls me and says, "Oh, I've got bad news for you." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "I've got another offer for 247. And I'm like, "Okay, when did this happen?" He's like, "Yesterday." And I'm like, "Okay, so what does that mean?" We've got our agreement at 240. I'm just waiting for the signature. And he said, "Well, it means that you have to see if you can beat," I think he said even beat the 247. He's like, "You got to see if you can beat the 247. And I was like, "What do you mean we have to see if I can beat the 247? We've already agreed to a deal. I thought you were a man of your word. I mean, you're going to go back on your word?" I mean, and really kind of put into question his ethics, I guess, and put him on his heels a little bit, but he kind of stayed dug in at 247. And then I pretty much left the conversation very, very well. I was very, very disappointed, obviously disappointed with him on the call, not being a jerk, but more just like very heavy disappointment and upset that he wasn't a man of his word, and mentioned that several times. And then, and also mentioned, I don't know if I actually want to do business with you anyway, because you're not somebody that follows through with your word. So even if I could do two, go ahead.
Sorry, time out. So I just want to point out to everyone, because we talked about it actually on our team meeting call yesterday, that one of the most difficult things in this business is sometimes being very candid with the clients and people that we work with. So tell me a little bit about how you felt in doing that. Now, it sounded like you were almost reacting on emotion. Were you?
Yeah, I was emotional and I was pretty pissed, but I was trying to, I mean, in hindsight, I look back and obviously probably talk like I was less emotional, but I was, I was pretty emotional about it, but trying to keep it together. I mean, I did still have, I was still wanting to get the deal and not at 247. And so it wasn't very hard. It wasn't like I was pretending my disappointment. But I certainly wasn't glossing over it either. And was certainly not being like, oh, now I got to beat 247. I was continuing to harp on the fact that we had an agreement and how upsetting and disappointing this was, and how concerned I was to even continue talking, even if we did have a deal.
So I think this is a fine line that we have to run, right? We have to show some emotion, but we can't show too much that we hurt our chances on the deal. So how do you think that you balanced the two on that? I heard a little bit about it, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I still wanted to get the deal, which is, the reason that I kept saying over and over how he was not going, wasn't on his word, and that I was not sure how that was, other than being upset and like getting all in his face. I mean, or yelling at him or anything like, oh, we got a deal. We had a deal. You have to go through. I mean, I think that, the only strategic thing I did to kind of throw in with my emotions was the thing of basically saying, like, I don't know if I even want to do the deal anyway. Like, talking as though the deal was still on the table, which it was, but saying like, oh, now I don't know if I want to do it. You're somebody that calls me after a handshake or verbal agreement. I'm not sure I want to be the buyer anyway. I don't know if you're somebody I want to work with.
So what you did effectively was a somewhat of a presumptive close by saying, I don't know if I want to do the deal anymore. We've got this deal verbally under contract, Mr. Seller, in my opinion. Now, I don't know if I want to do the deal with you because you've just come back and tried to renegotiate with me. Yeah,
I guess that is, it's a good way to put it. Kind of, yeah. So,
okay, so I interrupted you. You were I think right at the point where you were about ready to call him back. If I remember the story, you had waited 30 minutes.
Yeah, so that conversation ended. And it basically ended like, okay, that's it. We're not doing the deal. He's at 247. I'm not coming up at all because I don't even know if I want to work with the guy anyway. And he said, well, that's too bad. And then I said, okay, that is too bad. Well, call me if you change your mind and you want to stick with your original agreement. And that conversation ended. And then you overheard me, Ryan. And then we talked about it a little bit. And it wasn't 5 or 10 minutes that I called him back. I think it was like an hour. After we had talked about it and thought about it. And so then I called him back and said, again, went over, the very first thing was again going over how disappointing it was, how I really am concerned about doing business with him, how this is just really upsetting, and how, I'm not sure if I want to do business with someone that does that. So really, he probably at that point was feeling pretty, because he was a pretty proud guy and feeling pretty bad on his own. But then I did go up. So maybe I didn't even have to, but I said, you know what, I'll go up. Even though we had an original deal at 240, I'll go up to 240. I think it was 242 or 243 and said, and do the deal, but I don't want any more games. We got to get this I'm going to send you the new contract and we need to get it signed right now over DocuSign. And so he agreed to that. Who knows if he ever had a 247 offer. We didn't go all the way up to the 247 or whatever that other offer was. He did get us up more, but we were able to get the deal. So that's kind of how that thing resolved. And then the rest of the transaction was smooth.
So real quick on that, I think a really important part, and we should not gloss this over, is that upon that second conversation, we'll call it second conversation because it's the second one that day likely that you had with them.
Yeah.
That was the one where you said, if you verbally agree to this, I'm no longer going to, go past today. You've got to sign this today. So you put him in heavy action mode, or else this deal was finished, done. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, because I wasn't just going to, he already went back on his word once. I'm not just going to keep fooling around with him
Yep. So, the topic today is salvaged deals or saved deals. And I think one of the key takeaways to this is this was right at the beginning of the deal that we saved it. It wasn't a story of, title issues or things after we've gotten it under contract. We can lose deals right before they even start during our negotiation when we're trying to get them under. Every single one of us is on the call has probably been in a situation where we're negotiating with against someone else on the other side. There's various tactics that you can use and various negotiating strategies you can use to outwit, outmaneuver, or get that deal from that other person or other parties. In this instance, there's just one example of many that Dave used to effectively outmaneuver another buyer that we think was there. We don't have proof, but again, we have to take the guy at his word. Anything else you want to elaborate on Litzinger?
No, that was it. It was a prime hot location, so that probably made his story more believable that he had another buyer, and he may have, but yeah.
Let's move on to Colonia. It's an interesting one. It's one that took a little bit of time. So give the story about it, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, so Colonia, I followed up with this guy for like 2 years. Finally got into the conversations during my follow-up. I know this isn't a call about follow-ups, but we're less than a minute. So this would have easily been one where I'm like, I'm never going to get a deal out of this guy. And then sure enough, one day I calls him and he's like, I call him and he's like, yeah, let's meet. So I'm like, wow, okay. I meet him at the property.
This is not a call about follow-up, but how long did you follow up with that particular seller?
I think it might have been like almost 2 years, a year and a half, maybe.
Okay. 70% of our deals should be coming after day 30. Just had to put that in there. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. So I finally meet the guy at the property. It's a duplex, kind of in the Normandy area. There's lower values around this particular area. It wasn't Normandy. It was a little further east. But duplex, it was a family property. He inherited it from his mom. From his dad. This is what he says. It's completely full hoarder house, needs a decent amount of work, not a tremendous amount, but it is completely full, but very, very nice bones and like a real nice vestibule kind of thing when you walk into, almost like apartment style, like you walk into a little vestibule and then you can go to left or right into either side of the duplex. So nice property. But the value just wasn't there, and there needed such a clean out and repair that I could only offer him. I think I was under 5,000 when I first made an offer, which was unbelievable even to me. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry, this is just all I can do. And he surprisingly, he was upset, but he called me back like I think that same day. So I was well aware he was motivated to get this done, and said, could you do 5,500 or something like that. I think we ended up at 5,000. I should have these specific numbers in front of me. Not a high number. And I said, okay. Or maybe he went to 6,000. And I said, I think I can do that. Let me go by there one more time if it's okay with you and take a look. And what I did then is I called an end buyer who I know really likes that area, because I was really pushing it. I thought there was a deal there, but it needed a lot of work. So I called an end buyer that I know likes that area a lot. He even lives around there. And I called him, and he went by right away and was like, I want it. He couldn't even get in the house. And he's like, I want it. I want to buy it. I want to buy it. And I told him 15,000. And he's like, yep, 15, I'll buy it. Done. Let's do it. And so he was all over it. And he's experienced, so he wasn't even really worried about going inside. Obviously, he had to go inside, but he had no concerns. I sent him pictures and told him about it. So he wanted it. So I've got a buyer at 15. This guy wants, so at that point, I'm like, sure, yeah, let's go up. So I think it was 5,500 or 6,000. So I called him. I said, yeah, I can do it. Let's do it. So I met him right away at his other house, and he lives in the city, and got the contract signed. And there started talking to him about a lot of other issues that were coming to light, back taxes, sewer liens, all these things. And right there on the spot, he basically tells me the only reason that, he's basically not making any money on the deal at all, maybe $500, because he's got back taxes and sewer liens. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, that's a bummer. That's why it was 6,000. That's why he wanted 6,000. He wanted to make 1,000. And I'm like, that's fine. That's fair. You deserve to make $1,000. I already got a buyer for 15. So, get the deal done. And then he starts telling me about actually how his sister was the one that was the last one living there. His dad passed right before his sister, and there might be some issues with the trust. And I'm like, oh boy. So I'm like, well, we'll see what title says. So we get the contract to title, both contracts. We get the buyer contract and the seller contract to title at the same time. Email it over to him. And there are issues. That property was never inherited by this guy. It was inherited by the sister from the dad. And then the sister passed away and it went to probate. He was the last heir, but he and the sister hadn't talked in 20 years. They were estranged from each other. So he's inheriting this from his sister, who inherited it from his dad. And she basically got everything from the dad and like made, she was one of those people who basically took advantage of the dad and had every last penny siphoned to her. And when it didn't go to her, she even had it like set up to where it would go to this like stepdaughter that she hadn't really had much of a relationship with in Texas, and who this guy didn't even know how to reach her. And so essentially this property, the proceeds from this property were supposed to go to this stepdaughter in Texas. And in addition to that, there was about $60,000, I think, in an IRA that was supposed to go to this stepdaughter in Texas. And this poor guy's having to jump through all the hoops with this probate because he's the executor to figure out a way to get all this stuff out of probate just to go to this stepdaughter that doesn't even know the money's coming and doesn't even have anything to do with the family anymore. So he's doing all this work and he's getting nothing from it.
Okay,
And
so now motivation's down for the guy that we thought was the seller.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Way down. So his attorney keeps telling him she thinks there's a way where he can sell the property and get some proceeds on that. And I'm like, okay, so the attorney's saying this, but not being very communicative to him or to me. And all the while, he will not give the attorney my information, or will not give me the attorney's information to talk for me or the title company to communicate directly with her. So each time I talk to him, he keeps saying, I don't know if this deal is going to happen. This deal just might not happen. This just might not happen. But he keeps signing extensions on closing to keep it alive. And I keep talking to the buyer basically 2 or 3 times a week, telling him exactly what's going on. And he's frustrated because he's got contractors lined up and hard money lined up. But he basically wants the property real bad. So he's hanging in there. As long as I communicate with him, he's sticking with it. So,
yep. So how do we get to the point where we are close to resolving, and how do we resolve?
Yeah, so the way we finally resolve is the guy calls, and this is after a couple months of dealing with this with the attorney. The attorney says we're there and we can sell. And then we need to get another amendment signed. We're like a day or two before expiration. And I'm like, great, let's do another amendment. And he says, for all this trouble, and he has gone through a lot of trouble. He's like, I need more money. And I'm like, well, what do you need? What do you mean? And he won't tell me. He's like, whatever he thinks fair. So I kind of just leave it. And then he keeps saying it, but I keep asking for a number from him. And while he's saying this, I ask the buyer what, I tell him the situation and see what he thinks about it. And he basically says that he would be willing to pay a little bit. He says he'd be willing to pay $1,000. So I'm like, okay. So then I called the seller back, and I knew I at least had an extra $1,000, and finally got a number out of him. He said he'd be happy with another $2,000. So I'm like, okay, we can do it. So just to get him to move and get this thing going to the finish line, I said, okay. So then I paid the extra $1,000, and the buyer paid an extra $1,000 to get this guy $2,000 more. So he was able to walk away with some money after dealing with all this stuff. And then we got the deal.
Everyone ended up happy because the end buyer got the deal. The seller got some money despite all his troubles. And then the heir got whatever was owed to them as well, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I don't know about the heir. I don't think she got anything on the property, and I don't know what happened with the IRA. I didn't really ask, but yeah, he got, yeah, the seller got some money from the property. I think he ended up walking away with about $2,500 for dealing with all that. And then, yeah, buyer got the property and we got the deal too.
And now specifically with regards to that deal, who was instrumental to clear up all the issues that you were dealing with? Was it the attorney? Was it the title company? Was it the seller? Who did it?
It was really the attorney, who I never even talked to. I found out through the probate courts who his probate attorney was, but I don't know if that was who was actually taking care of the property. So I called this lady a couple times. She never called me back. So I have no idea who the attorney was. So
I love what you just said. You found out from the probate, because that is public record, who the attorney was. You tried to reach out to them, because ultimately what we want to be able to do is communicate directly to the person or people who are helping solve the problem. And in this case, we weren't able to, and it still got done, luckily.
Right.
Excellent. Anything else that you want to point out about that? I know you got to run.
Yeah, I got to run. No, it was just a long, just trying to keep the guy on the hook, that's all it was. So, just keeping him motivated for that $1,000 and just kind of like making it sound like, okay, we're almost there. And eventually we got there, but yeah, just continuing to make it seem like, hey, we might have this resolved within the next week. Let's just stick with it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And we're going to move on to Ollie. So thank you, Dave, for your stories.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care,
right.
Dave.
There he is, Ollie.
Hey, people.
Hello. All right. So, Ollie, we are going through a deal right now that you wanted to talk about. So let's give the backstory on it. We'll get into Jen. This is where we're going to get into a little bit of the subject too, and Ollie can elaborate a little bit about what he's learned about that process during this.
Hey there, if you're looking to get the ultimate edge for your real estate investing company, go to doorstodeals.com/invest for more information. Just so you know, a high percentage of the people that we interview on this podcast are actually already Three Doors Network members. And our network members have a lot of extra resources. They have access to an online training vault with over 3 years worth of content in it. They have access to vendor savings like our Home Depot discount that's literally saved thousands of dollars for members. And we have a weekly group coaching call, and we have a lot of other great things as well as part of the Three Doors Network. So make sure that you check it out on doorstodeals.com/invest.
Ollie. We are going through a deal right now that you wanted to talk about. So let's give the backstory on it. We'll get into Jen. This is where we're going to get into a little bit of the subject too, and Ollie can elaborate a little bit about what he's learned about that process during this.
Sure. You want me to start?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So it started out like every other deal that we go to. I got a phone call for an appointment. The brother lives in D.C., but he's renting the property in Missouri to his younger brother, but he was ready to sell it. So no red flags there. I go knock on the door. The younger brother answers the door, and the place is trashed. It was really disappointing because it had just been rehabbed the last few years, but the younger brother had really trashed it up. So I wasn't able to give a great offer because I knew I had a lot of repairs, about $15,000 in repairs. Went back to the seller in DC, and I told him the condition. He admitted that he had not seen the place in 6 months or 6 years, and then his brother kept telling him that it was being taken care of. I was like, well, yeah, it's being taken care of, but not in a good way. So we went back and forth on pricing with the brother in DC. He never really alluded to how much he owed on it, but he was kind of stuck on a price. I think I started out in the 160s range, and we ended up settling for 179, which was definitely a push. Especially with Ryan and I not agreeing what the ARV was going to be afterwards. But we felt like it was a good deal at 179. And the brother who lived in the place requested 3 weeks to move out. So we had a contract, 3 weeks to move out, good to go. That Sunday, so we're supposed to close on a Monday. I don't remember the date originally. It was like 7/2, I think, something like that. And no, it was longer. It was back in June. So we were supposed to close on a Monday. I get a call from the brother and the seller in DC stating that he didn't know he owed money and he can't close. So the seller had gotten a statement from the title company on Thursday or Friday, and on Sunday, the day before, we're supposed to close at like 10 o'clock. he calls me and says he can't close. He doesn't have the $4,900 to close the deal.
So hold on, let's take a step back. He knew he owed money. He just didn't know how much he owed. Is that correct?
He thought he was in a tax abatement. He thought when he purchased the place, it was 10 years free tax, and it ended up being only 9 years. And so he owed a full year of back taxes and then partially for this year's taxes. So he did know, he thought his brother was paying the other stuff, and then he thought he didn't have any taxes. And it turns out he did have taxes, and his brother wasn't paying sewer, water, or any of those other things.
Okay.
So that was a big jump. So we were already stretching at 179. Now he's, $4,900 short at closing because of all the back expenses. The one thing we agreed to do right there was like, hey, let's obviously not close and kind of figure out what's going on. I went to the condo on Monday, and the brother had not moved out at all. All of his stuff was still there. So we had a conversation with the brother that he needed to be out in 7 days. The brother did agree to this one, and I went by the next day, and he was packing up and moving out. And then looking at the numbers and talking with Ryan, we could not make it work for a clean buy rehab sell. It was just too tight in trying to pay the $4,900 in back taxes and stuff. It wasn't going to work anymore. But then we started looking at it, and I guess we got Jason involved. We reached out to Jason, who then called the seller and found out that the seller had a 30-year mortgage that he had paid down 10 years worth of it. Now he was something like 6 months behind in paying it, but he did have a 30-year mortgage that he had paid down 10 years on it, and sort of started lighting up that this could be a good creative financing opportunity if we reinstated the mortgage and then covered the back taxes by the money we're saving by not borrowing so much, and that the deal could actually work still for either a lease option after we rehabbed it or to try to sell it after we rehabbed it. So it was great because it was a deal that I thought was dead. And then talking with Jason, we figured out that because there was a mortgage that we could do, that we could reinstate, and has the opportunity to, now that we're only borrowing, I think it was like $10,000 to purchase the place, it ended up working out.
Okay, a couple things on that. Now, the first 10 years, really first 15 years, you're paying more in interest than in principal. And then, obviously as the length of that loan goes on, you're paying more in principal than interest. Most loans are front loaded with interest, and the principal gets reduced at a higher rate as it continues to go. So that was really an attractive part of this, that there was 10 years off, correct?
Correct. It wouldn't have worked without that 10 years invested.
Okay. In addition to that, what was the interest rate on that loan?
Ooh, I don't remember. Do you?
I want to say it was in the fours. Is that right?
I was going to say 4.5. So probably.
Yeah. Okay. So it was 4.5. So how did that change the perspective of the deal? How can we then do it where we couldn't because of how we would have done the deal normally? Elaborate so people can understand a little bit better.
So from the way that I understand it was that because we were going to utilize other people's money to purchase this place and be charged interest and fees from them, by utilizing the mortgage that existed at the lower rate than we would for us getting loans, it freed up I want to say like $9,000 or something like that, $7,000. I can't remember the exact number we calculated out, but it improved our margins on this because we were not borrowing outside money.
Okay, so it helps in a couple of different ways. One, if you're limited with the amount of money that you have access to, owner financed or subject to deals eliminates that objective, right? So it doesn't eliminate it completely, but it certainly diminishes it. So in this particular example, let's just use this one. So it was a purchase price then of what, 190 when we're all said and done? 185, something like that?
Yeah, 185.
Okay, 185. So let's say we're all in it for 185. We're taking over the loan, which is now at what, was it 180 or 175, somewhere in that range?
176.
176. Okay, so for simple math, for those of you who are following, the interest alone on a $176,000, if it doesn't reduce the principal, is roughly $7,900 for the year. All right, just take 176 times 0.045, you get 79.20, so roughly $7,900. That's interest, doesn't include any principal reduction, right? So I'm not calculating at this. For this example, I'm not calculating how much your payments are going to be. I'm just trying to calculate interest. Same example, 176,000, and you'll understand why, times 0.08. So that's 8% interest. Okay, that's most of the money that we get lent from our private funds comes at 8%. So I said it was 79.20 or 7,900. Let's round down. Well, $14,000 or $14,080 is the interest that would be owed over the course of a year if you took 176 times 0.08. So if I'm going to do this and say 79.20 less 14.40 on an entire year, if I held Missouri for an entire year, it would be a difference of $6,160 that we would save just on that financing and just reducing the interest from 8% to 4.5%. Now, in all likelihood, if we're going to turn this house to renovate it and resell it, we're not going to keep it for an entire year. So when you analyzed it, what was the original exit strategy?
Mine?
Yes.
The first was we actually had two different rehab opportunities. One was to do enhanced rehab and really push to try to get to the top of the ARV. The second one was because it had been rehabbed in the last 7 years, it wasn't in terrible shape. So just fixing the things that brother broke, cleaning it up, and then putting it out that way. And then, so those were the two main exit strategies.
Okay, so on those exit strategies, what was the expected timeline that we were going to hold those, roughly?
The short one was 6 weeks. The long one, the bigger one was, I think we had 5 months in.
Okay, so let's just assume the shortest of short. You're probably not going to sell that one in 6 weeks. It's going to take some weeks, right, to ramp up the renovation, and then sell it. So best case scenario, you're probably talking 3 months, right? And then the other one, you're probably talking 6 months. And that's just based off my knowledge of the property. So again, what I'm trying to get at and help everyone understand is how the power of financing can help you reduce your cost and or increase your purchase price. So over the course of a year, if you save $6,160 and you divide that by 12, you're effectively saving yourself $513 a month. So if we held it for 3 months, that's $1,500. If we held it for 6 months, that is $3,000. Okay, so that doesn't sound like a crazy big difference to me. Does it sound like one to you, Ellie?
Nope.
Okay, so how were we able to raise our offer from that original, I think, 176 to then say, okay, we're okay with putting in up to 185 because he's got payments and arrears, back taxes, and things of that nature? What did we do?
Yeah, so the other one we did, you're talking about him paying back?
Well, that's one of the things we did, yes.
All right, so one of them was because he seemed like a good guy. Seemed like he really got kind of screwed over by his brother. One of the things we found out too is he admitted to or explained that somehow his job was tied to the foreclosure. That if he had gotten foreclosed on, he could lose his job in the federal government in D.C. And so he was really trying to work with us, obviously, to get this done. So what we presented to him was like, hey, we think we can still make this deal work. We'll upfront the back taxes that you owe, but we need you to pay those back within a year. And would you agree to do that so that we can get this deal still to close? And it actually was no time at all. He said, absolutely no problem. I sent him over like, basically, here's what we want you to pay each month for the next 12 months. He signed it and said, we're good to go.
Okay. So that effectively put our all in from 185 down to about 180? Because I think the taxes were about 5. Is that right?
Yeah, it was like 4,900. Yeah, so 180.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in it for 180. So we found a way to have him pay for it. We saved $1,500 or $3,000. And here's the other big part of this that everyone needs to understand. We're not utilizing $176,000 of someone else's money, meaning a private lender, or having to go out and get financing on our own. We're utilizing financing that's already in place. So tack all that in together, and then our exit strategy on the back end was to do a lease to purchase to someone. So we're going to do a little bit of work, and we're going to do a lease to purchase, which means that we're effectively going to hold the note from when we bought it to when we sell it. We're going to cash flow that. So we just turned a deal that normally would be one we'd walk away or a really thin deal into a deal that we're going to generate cash flow on a monthly basis. We're going to profit from on the buy, on the sell, and we're going to get some of the money back that we've effectively loaned the seller to pay for the taxes. I know this is a tough concept. We're not trying to dive too deep into subject twos today. This is about salvaging deals. What I really want everyone to get from this is another way that you can sell deals when maybe you don't think there's a way. How would you want to sum it up, Ali?
Yeah, you know what? I guess a couple things on that is I did think this deal was dead. And I think Jason did a training for us and we've had some conversations around it, but I had no grasp of what, subject to was going to do and how to do it. But I knew that this might be an opportunity because it is a good area for, St. Louis people. I could see somebody wanting to lease to own down in that area. And there was no way we could do it in traditional sense. So and then what I'm just saying is don't not do it because you don't understand. Go forward with it and find the resources to help you understand, go through it, because each deal, as all deals are, is a little bit different. So it's hard to say this is exactly how it's going to work out. But in this one, because there was an existing loan that we could reinstate, it made everything else work for us to get this deal done.
Yep, loved it. Bonnie asked, who carries the insurance and taxes while the renovation is going on? I'm presuming that's with the subject to, and questions specifically about that. The answer there is you're actually buying the property, Bonnie, so you would carry the insurance and you're responsible for the taxes. Now, in this particular example, we would not hold this property very long. Ali said 6 weeks. It's going to be a really quick in and out renovation. We're going to find a buyer really quickly. So I had mentioned 3 months. We're not going to hold it 3 months, not based off the exit strategy that we're going to have on this. I mean, we're going to maybe hold it at 6 weeks. We might hold it 2 months. So it's going to cost us a little bit in dead time during that time, or dead carrying costs, if you will. But yeah, you carry the insurance and you pay for the taxes during that time that you own it and you haven't sold it to somebody else.
Now, Ryan, just for clarification, because I think Jason had said this at some time, or maybe I just made up, is he collects the insurance and the taxes within the monthly payments because he wants to ensure that they get paid. So that's what he does in his process, was he would collect it and then pay for those things. The individuals still carry their own insurance for like a renter's insurance for the things inside of it, but he collects it in the payment.
That's correct. So you're still paying once you sell it. What Ollie's saying is on the back end, when you sell it lease to purchase, you're still carrying or paying for the taxes directly. You're still paying the insurance. You don't have to have full coverage insurance because you're not insuring the contents. You have that person who's living there get contents insurance or personal insurance. So again, I don't want to get too caught up in the subject too. We've done some training on that. Jason Courtney is the subject matter expert on that for us within our network. He's done some trainings for the network. He's done some trainings for our personal team. We are focusing more on this as an exit strategy for sure because we believe in it. If you want more information on it, please try to reference the training that he's done. I want to say it was 5 or 6 weeks ago, somewhere in that range.
Was it that long? Okay.
It might have been 4, but it hasn't been terribly long, but it's been a few weeks. So he has done one recently. Please reference that. He is absolutely a subject matter expert. I know a little bit to get through. Ali, anything else you wanted to talk about with regards to Missouri?
I guess the only thing I would say is when you're looking at this and those other options is it's best to have low repairs, because that makes the deal kind of hard if it has a high repair deal. And as far as specifically with Missouri, we're still going through this process. We're still trying to, we haven't closed on this yet, but I'm just excited that we still have it in the options, and it looks like it'll close this week.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Yes, subject to deals are best when you don't have much work, because you're going to have to bring in your own funds for the work, and again, that carrying cost just adds up when someone's not in there paying you. Anything else you want to talk about with regards to salvaging deals, Ali?
I had one when Dave was talking. Nothing off the top of my head, so go ahead.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. All right. I do want to point out two other deals. These are not my deals that I've been working on. These are actually deals that Kenton has been working on. And I wanted to bring them up each because each of them have really kind of simple reasons that we're going to end up doing the deals. And yet they both have taken a long time. So Missouri Bottom, we're actually selling that one to a network partner. And we're super excited about that. We love doing deals with all the network partners. It was a deal that we sent out, and we've had it under contract now for, 2-3 months, maybe 4 months now. It's been a while. And the deal got stalled. The deal got stalled because the person who was selling it to us, or who we thought was the seller, there's actually another heir involved. And that heir, we were unable to communicate with that heir. It was just a guy that we couldn't get his contact. We tried, and then, unbeknownst to me, I thought that it was a bigger issue than just reaching out to this heir and finding the heir and who he was and communicating with him. I thought he was unwilling. I thought there was, if the heir's unwilling to sign, well, what do? Maybe you offer the guy some money, some more money to try to get the deal done. There's a couple ways to try to get it, but ultimately you are at their mercy a bit. So I asked, it was about 2 weeks ago, I said, hey, what's going on with this deal? Why exactly have we not closed? And it was, well, we have not contacted this heir. It wasn't that he was unwilling. We don't know if he was unwilling. He hadn't reached out. We hadn't been able to communicate with him. So I asked, okay, well, what's the guy's name? So I I looked him up on Facebook and found out that he works for a fire department here in the St. Louis area. And I said, well, have we tried reaching out to his work? He's a firefighter, so I suspect we can probably reach him by calling the firehouse. So Dee, who works with us and does a great job with all our closings, she reached out, and lo and behold, about a day later, we got in touch with him, and he's willing to sign. So that was just something super simple, and it took a different perspective to figure out, hey, this is not that difficult of an issue to resolve. We just need to communicate with this person and see if they're willing to do it. I believe we're going to get that closed at the end of this month, or possibly the first week of August. So that's a good quick story. The second story I want to talk about is also a deal that Kenton's working on. It's on Odell in the city. When we started communicating with this seller, the deal was under contract with another investor, one of our competitors, not a network partner. And we know the guy. We've done some deals with the guy in the past. But the seller really did not want to continue working with him. It was because, from what I have been told, it was because they just didn't think the deal was going to go through. They weren't happy with the title company that the buyer was working with, and they had not performed. So there were some title issues, certainly, but for whatever reason, the relationship between the seller and the buyer was not phenomenal. So Kenton talked to the guy. Kenton continued to talk to the guy, and finally we got a contract signed. But we were really hesitant to get a contract signed because we really wanted to make sure that they got a mutual release on the other contract, because we don't want to come in and be that buyer and try to knock a deal out. So ultimately what we said is, after that last amendment that they had signed to extend closing, which I believe was the end of May, it's either the end of May or the end of June, then we could sign a contract. So we finally did sign a contract with them because that time had elapsed. Neither party had closed. The deal was not released, but effectively passed. So he could then move on to another contract if he so wanted to. So that doesn't eliminate the fact that there's still title issues. There's title issues. There's a tenant in the property. We've still not seen the property. The previous buyer had not seen the property. So we're still kind of going off of this guy's, word that it's an XYZ condition, and we're trying to get this deal done. Okay, so why did I want to bring this up? Well, first, we did a really good job communicating with the seller. Kenton did a really good job communicating with the seller and, saying we could probably get this deal done. I don't think he made the assertion that we would absolutely get the deal done. Maybe he did. I wasn't on all the calls, but he did something to make the seller feel more confident in us than the confidence that he had in the current buyer that he was working with. In addition to that, since we've gotten it under contract and since we've been working with that seller, D, again, coming through, communicating really well, building relationships. She has built a good relationship with the seller and the seller's daughter. So the seller isn't exactly the best person with regards to paperwork from what I've gathered or understand. However, he's asking and getting help from his daughter. So his daughter now is in communication with D, which I don't think that communication was there on the other deal. And because of that, they're going to get the necessary paperwork that's needed for this deal to actually close. So Kenton did a great job on the front end of communicating with the seller. Dee did a great job of communicating with the seller and also finding someone who could help the seller actually get the stuff done. Because the paperwork wasn't there, this deal wouldn't have closed if we didn't get the paperwork done. So to me, that's the power of positive communication. Ali pointed out, just thought about McPherson. That's another deal that he did. Ali, I don't think we really have enough time for that. We've got about 5 minutes left. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions that we haven't gone over? Does anyone want an overview of maybe a different model? Or does someone have something that they're going through right now that they'd like to talk about so that we can maybe brainstorm a solution? If you do, please chat me privately. Please chat in to all panelists. It doesn't matter. I'd love to brainstorm on an idea. If we don't get one, I can put Ali back on to talk about McPherson. All right, Ali, let's have you hop back on.
All right, so this one was actually really quick. So right before the COVID quarantine kicked into play, we had signed a house on McPherson. I actually had a buyer who signed with us at the same time, so we were all excited about a double close. About a week after we signed the contract, the quarantine came in. The seller is in her mid-70s, and she was extremely nervous about the idea of moving in the middle of that. So I met with the buyer who was double closing with us, and I said, look, she's 78 years old. She can't even find a place to look at because she's not allowed in these complexes. So the buyer was great. He said, okay, well, let me know when we can close on this. And after like a week of back and forth and looking at things and the seller not even being able to look at condos to move into for at least 60 days, we moved back closing 90 days. And we still did the double close. It was still a great job, but it was a 90 days hold off for the quarantine. So it was kind of interesting. I don't think we would be able to do that if the buyer wasn't so understanding and everybody was so comfortable this would close. It's just a matter of pushing it off for a few months.
Yep. No, that's a really good story about, and we're going to deal with various things with regards to COVID. It's going to continue to happen. So if you haven't dealt with them yet, you're going to encounter them at some point. Bonnie asked, do most sellers respond to electronic paperwork? I believe most do. There are going to be some sellers who just don't want to do electronic paperwork. Those are few and far between in my experience. And if you can use it, try to use technology because it certainly saves time. The one thing I would say to that, to counter that, there's something to be said for having people sign paperwork in person. So again, going back to COVID, it might be somewhat of a challenge right now, given the circumstances that we have and some people not wanting to interact with many people. So you might not be able to. But for those who are open and willing, I would highly recommend you always get, if you're an agent, listing paperwork signed at the kitchen table or in person. Contracts, if you're an investor, make sure to get those signed in person. if you're an investor, if you're an agent, listing price reductions, things of that nature, it's always good to have an in-person meeting because that's a tough conversation. Effectively, once we have that contract signed with the seller on an investment deal, the in-person interaction doesn't need to be great. You could potentially limit it to just the day of closing. So hopefully that answers your question, Bonnie. Ali, I appreciate you being on. Do you have any final thoughts, words for everyone?
Nope, just keep digging.
Going back to the onset of this call, only because I have the experience, only because this is how I learned. Short sales, it was a great way for me to learn. Every deal with short sales has some kind of a title issue. You're going to deal with title issues if you're on the investment side of real estate. And I feel like that's one of the things that some investors are almost spoiled because they don't have to deal with many. And once you get, a tax lien or an air issue or something like that, it's like, oh, well, this deal's dead because there's a title issue. Thing that couldn't be further from the truth. All it is find a way to get the deal done. Change the way you look at things. The things you look at will change. I believe in that. I believe that there's a solution to just about every problem in real estate. And hopefully this call helped you guys.
For this particular show, go to doorstodeals.com/bonus003. You'll find all sorts of useful information on our website, including a YouTube video replay, show notes, links, other great resources, you name it. So again, that's doorstodeals.com/bonus003. Go out, live your purpose, and above all else, go after your dreams. Take care till next time. Thanks for tuning into this show. For more episodes and resources that will unlock Doors to Deals, check out our website, doorstodeals.com.